Yes, audio's good.
Biggest misconception about misdemeanors is that they are minor.
To start hearing more and more stories of voter suppression, that broke my heart.
They're the ones that are using the system.
My grandma was fighting for integration back in her day, and I'm fighting for the same thing now.
The problem is the system is working the way it's supposed to.
We're recording.
Sorry.
Sometimes I feel like my life ended that day.
My car died on the side of the road. A cop walked over to my car and asked me if I needed help, and I said no.
John Clark was convicted on a misdemeanor gambling charge and was forced to work on a chain gang.
I just remember being pushed, like being cornered into a wall.
I was just starting out life.
And I didn't think I had anything to hide.
Mary Gay was sentenced to 30 days, plus court costs for stealing a hat.
I was arrested that evening.
It was a misdemeanor. That was the beginning of the nightmare that I had to go through.
Henry Nelson was arrested for using abusive language in the presence of a female and was sent off to the coal mines.
He said, "You're going to jail." And I'm like, "What for?"
Misdemeanors have historically been the chump change crimes that we didn't pay attention to.
I've done nothing. Man, I just got beat up by the police last night. I could have lost my life.
13 million. That's about 80% of all American criminal dockets. 80% of what our criminal courts do is misdemeanors.
Got him in cuffs, look. I ain't doing nothing.
The story of misdemeanors is the story of law enforcement continuing to prioritize African Americans, Mexican immigrants, America's so-called criminal class.
You act like I really just committed a serious crime.
You did do something illegal. You crossed the crosswalk.
You might see 2 or 3 police standing here waiting for you.
The cops will jump out of the van anytime, anywhere.
That's what I was doing.
The misdemeanor system has not gotten its fair share of blame. Misdemeanors are the invidious first step in the racialization of crime in this country.
Too often, arrests for minor crimes devolve into police violence and death for Black and brown people.
They got me for jaywalking.
Not wearing a seatbelt. My tail light was out.
I was arrested for being home. Driving with a suspended license. My license got suspended because I didn't know I had an unsafe parking.
I was drunk, and I was for this big claim that I was in
I want $744 fine because I
And how far back that goes is a really dark story. Reconstruction was an era when 4 million African Americans made it out of bondage and were able to achieve at really high levels, whether it was in business, in education, different ways of prosperity that really threatened white supremacy.
They elected many Black men to positions of power. Of course, that was a sea change from how power had been exercised during slavery, and a lot of white folks just didn't like it. They were nostalgic for the old days of overt white supremacy. And so they subverted Reconstruction.
If you look at misdemeanors and you track them from the Reconstruction era to modern day, you see the fingerprints everywhere of white supremacy and control of Black bodies.
The landowners, they had nearly lost everything. And the only way to get that back is to somehow corral the Black labor force back onto the same plantations that they had once worked.
The most effective way of forcing African Americans back into this condition that would be so similar to slavery was to begin to criminalize Black life itself.
Misdemeanor offenses for incredibly trivial or made-up things, what should have been tiny penalties for non-existent offenses, turn into years of people's lives.
Where were you taken? I was taken out to the camps. Where did you sleep? Slept on some hay. Chain was on me.
I'm being put into handcuffs. I'm being dragged into this cold space. I don't have anything to cover myself. And I'm asked to sit inside of this tiny little room, and I have no idea why I'm there.
Was there any jury that tried you? No, sir. Did the recorder ask you whether you wanted a lawyer? No, sir.
And I thought that I would have time to talk to a court-appointed attorney so we could talk about what happened. I could ask them to get other, pieces of evidence that would prove that, hey, I'm poor. It wasn't like I was trying to run off with this money.
Did they furnish any copy of the charge against you? No, sir, they did not. Did they give you any opportunity to plead to any accusation? They never gave me anything at all.
When they asked me how I pled no contest. I didn't understand that no contest is the same as guilty, and that I would walk away with a misdemeanor that would affect my ability to get hired.
The justice system after emancipation was weaponized against Black people. It perpetuated slavery by making the mechanisms of enslavement pretty much the same. Family separation, backbreaking labor, people having no rights. You could be sold on the steps of the courthouse that you were convicted in and given to the highest bidder.
A whole separate criminal code that applied to African Americans was established.
Many misdemeanor offenses are best understood as mechanisms of social control. They're not designed to catch dangerous or guilty people, but rather they are tools. We give them to police as additional ways of exercising their authority.
Some of these laws were overtly race-based, and with others then and now, the understanding was that the laws would look race-neutral, but they would be applied and enforced almost exclusively against Black people.
For these governments to sell prisoners into slavery, you first have to arrest lots of people. There's a big problem with that, though. There's just not enough crime for this system to work and for it to be profitable. The state governments of the South had to invent new crimes.
Southern legislatures, which are essentially run by Confederates at that time, are trying to reinscribe a form of slavery through a system of laws called Black Codes.
A whole category of new statutes passed in almost every southern state that attached these enormous penalties to what were in reality very minor thefts. Those were laws, and many others like it, that were only ever enforced against African Americans. And so it became a way to have a basis for arresting huge numbers of Black people.
I don't remember much about writing the check.
John Owen was caught taking 6 ears of corn from a cornfield and was arrested under the Black Codes.
This is $4, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 times 4 is $28. So just this pile right here is how much I went to jail for.
Owen was put in jail for months until he was finally tried for theft.
I have a theft charge. It's theft by check. I had money in the bank, but I didn't know how long it took for checks to process. Like, I know better now. I could have donated plasma, gotten $25.
Under his sentence, Owen was leased into convict labor and sent to the chain gang where he served 2 years for the corn and a 3rd year for the court costs.
I was in the Hays County Jail for a total of 45 days for $25 worth of food.
Michael Brown, who was the teenager who was killed by police in Ferguson, whose death led to the explosion of the Black Lives Matter movement, he was stopped for jaywalking. He stepped off the sidewalk and was walking in the street, and there was a local criminal ordinance that made it a crime to do so. African Americans are being cited for jaywalking at 3, 5, 10 times the rate of white pedestrians.
The legislatures of the white South make it a crime to walk alongside a railroad. In an era in which there are no paved roads, the easiest way for a poor person to get from one place to another is to walk alongside a railroad. That law didn't say this only applies to black people, but those were laws that were only ever enforced against African Americans.
All of us engage in what would be considered to be minor crimes. And for some people, it's crossing the street at the wrong time. But if you're black or brown, then it becomes categorized as something that's criminal.
So what is I doing?
Didn't use a crosswalk.
All I'm trying to do is go home, man. I'm tired. I just got off of work.
Nandi Kane says he was walking home from work when it happened.
I felt like they were gonna draw a gun out and shoot me in my back.
I'm tired of all this shit, man.
Vagrancy laws were passed that essentially meant any black person who was found on the streets unemployed and couldn't show evidence of work was a criminal, a vagrant.
Trespass laws originate from this idea that African Americans only belong in certain spaces and at certain times. And so they give police officers the ability, under the guise of law, to dictate where an African American person can be, what time they can be there, and how they can operate in certain spaces.
My kids' daycare was inside of one of the buildings to the Skyway, so I figured I'd take a walk, find somewhere to sit down, and wait on them to get there.
I'm going to New Horizons to pick up my kids. I was sitting there for 10 minutes.
Monroe Dolphus was standing in the train yard when he was grabbed by the sheriff's deputy. Monroe stated that he had not committed any crime.
Wait.
You're gonna go to jail.
I'm not doing anything wrong.
Hold on.
Can you please? No, come on, brother.
I'm not your brother.
This is assault.
At this moment, I saw my children's daycare class and their teachers and everything walking past while this was happening. He took the taser and drove it into my leg, and pretty much at that point lost all control of the leg.
The deputy later claimed that the crime committed by Dolphus was taking a 25-cent tin of fish from the lunch pail of a Southern Railway worker. Unable to provide any evidence to support this, the charge was changed to vagrancy.
And I kept asking them what I was being charged with. They'll create false charges just to make sure that everything is perpetuated.
Judge Longshore found Dolphus guilty of misdemeanor vagrancy and sentenced him to 5 months and 20 days of hard labor in the mines of Tennessee, coal, iron, and railroad.
Going back to the vagrancy laws of the late 19th century, the people who make those laws have in mind another group of people for whom there is an inherent threat to their livelihood, like breaking barbecue ordinances in public parks or sleeping in dormitories that white people don't think you live there.
I have every right to call the police.
It allows law enforcement to regulate whether or not certain behavior for one group of people is deemed criminal and another group of people is just frivolous activity.
Many people remember the Starbucks debacle in Philadelphia. There were 2 African-American men at a Starbucks. The employee had them arrested for loitering, where they're clearly not engaging in that behavior.
What did they get called for? Because there were 2 black guys sitting here meeting me? Yes, I did.
Loitering is a police tool of choice. It's the go-to offense that police often use to impose their authority. In the misdemeanor system, there is no conduct too minor, no act too small that the state cannot render a crime.
Black people charged with a misdemeanor are 75% more likely to be locked up than white people. You have to realize that these laws didn't happen by chance. They were part of a system to continue to oppress Black bodies.
Our misdemeanor system includes all kinds of offenses, and some of them can be quite serious. Domestic violence, DUI, but most of the time, we treat minor, harmless conduct as misdemeanors. Traffic offenses, jaywalking, order maintenance offenses, spitting, driving on a suspended license for failure to pay a fine. And yet, these minor, meaningless misdemeanors can have terrible consequences for individuals. To understand the misdemeanor system, follow the money.
The accused are paying for the judges, the prosecutors, and the public
They made
defender.
more than $3.5 million off phone
Commissary at the jail, it's a known moneymaker.
They call it the $20 ad.
Time a family member transfers money in JPay.
Pocketing leftover money from the inmates'
about
food budget.
$2,000 a month in e-cig
They are a
sales.
controversial food vendor with a big
fraud,
state contract.
waste, and abuse. The company that uses inmate workers.
Today's system is estimated at $80 billion. The misdemeanor side of it, it is a way of saddling people with fines and fees that will put money in the pockets of the administrators of that system.
The first time I got a ticket, my insurance had lapsed. So I got the speeding ticket and I got a no insurance ticket at the same time. The next time I got pulled over, I was arrested for driving with a suspended license. I paid the tickets, paid the court costs, paid my fees and fines, but they said for driving with a suspended license, the punishment for that is we're gonna suspend your license for 2 years. I would often have to choose between paying my inspection or my registration or paying my light bill or other bills that I had. I had to drive my car to get to work because I had a construction job. If I needed to take material to the job, I couldn't take plywood or 2x4s on a bus.
I felt like there was no way I was gonna be able to take care of the kids on my own while you were out because I didn't know how long you were gonna be in jail.
This officer saw me, a young Hispanic guy, driving a 63 Impala and said, you know what, that guy, he's up to something. I was trying to go to work, trying to pay bills, and he's treating me like a hardened criminal. That misdemeanor charge ended up becoming something that I couldn't get rid of.
They're being treated as revenue sources, charged daily fees for being in jail, supervision fees, tether fees, drug testing fees, database fees, to fund bail bondsmen, private probation companies, electronic monitoring companies, drug testing companies. It is disturbingly similar to the way that we saw African Americans being exploited in the post-war South.
I'm DeMario Davis, linebacker for the New Orleans Saints. I was born and raised in Mississippi, pretty much raised by a single mom. Entering into my second year of college, me and a teammate were caught shoplifting groceries from Walmart. It kind of felt a lot more like a drug bust than us having stole some groceries. The bail was set at $10,000, and I didn't have $10,000. The football coaches bailed us out. A misdemeanor, you're supposed to be able to be in front of the judge within 90 days, but this is not happening. This is not happening in our country. We have people who are spending 7, 8 months in jail who have not even been sentenced.
Cop arrested me and I was charged with the misdemeanor.
The term chain gang was coined on account of the shackle worn by convict laborers.
They said, okay, listen, we're going to let you go home now. But Scram's going to come and put a monitor on you.
They were taken to an anvil, where a rivet was pounded into the ankle cuffs to keep them closed. Then the cuffs were chained together.
The initial fee to get on the Scram was $250. That's just to have it put on. Then after that, they charged me $220 a month for the actual monitor.
Many of the convicts suffered from shackle sores, ulcers where the iron ground against their skin. Gangrene and other infections were also common.
Right after they put it on me, you start causing these really severe sores and rashes. And their attitude pretty much is, it's court ordered, it's by a judge, and you'll wear it, or you can go back to jail.
The emaciated convict laborers worked their entire days barefoot, but the shackles were always on their ankles. They mined in them, slept in them, and those who died of disease or beatings were buried in them.
What they're doing is unjust. What they're doing is profiteering, because you're paying them. You're their slave with their shackle on your foot.
I remember this hopeless feeling just overcome me. I couldn't take care of my family.
The biggest misconception about misdemeanors is that they are minor. The full consequences of getting a misdemeanor can be astronomical.
It hurt me for 10 years, and it completely disrupted my life. And I've been trying to figure out how to get my life back on track. This will be a part of my story for the rest of my life.
When people are booked into jails for a week or a year or even a day, you just cannot avoid the trauma that's inflicted upon you.
The moment you hit the jail, you don't come out of that unchanged or untouched. You witness trauma, you witness violence, and it changes you. It changes your community.
I tried to get a job at Amazon where my roommate worked. I called to Walmart and I called to several other retail stores. I got turned away because I had a misdemeanor charge for theft.
Not enough people talk about what it means to have a misdemeanor on your record. It can determine the kind of job that you get, to the kind of housing that you can qualify for, to the kind of schools that you can go to. A lot of people are harmed for life because of the smallest infractions.
They're being rendered homeless. They're going without food, without medication. Their children are suffering.
Due to misdemeanors, I lost my housing. Shortly after that, I lost my vehicle, which led to me losing my job. And it was just one thing after another, like kicks to the face. I had full custody of my children. They had to get to school. We had to sleep in the car, waking up at like 4 in the morning, getting to a laundromat to make sure that they have clean school uniforms.
I had worked so hard and all of that was ruined by one charge. One misdemeanor ruined my ability to get even just basic work.
They can't get a job if they have to check a box that says they've been convicted of a crime. They can't even rent housing because they got poor credit when they received a ridiculous $500 speeding violation. So this system was designed both to extract from people, but also to marginalize their presence in society.
It's finna be a mass grave site.
This is a dormitory. A stupid crowd. These are the beds. They right beside each other. And this is the space.
Everybody just dying and getting sick and shit. Like, this shit serious as fuck. Bro, you all right? You want me to go get the police?
No.
What have you done this bitch?
You ain't gonna do nothing about it.
This motherfucker literally in this bitch dying, bro. I don't know what to do.
One of the worst places to be during this pandemic is locked up in jail.
The judge never said, I'm sending you to prison to die.
The same horror story is emerging of the unchecked spread of infection and inmates essentially being left to die.
Now, jaywalking or theft of a small amount or any sort of vagrancy type of behavior can lead to your incarceration and eventual contracting of the virus and death.
I've been in jail for 2.5 months for petty theft, a nonviolent crime that carries a misdemeanor charge for the price value of less than $100. There's been 3 deaths, 2 being inmates, 1 being a guard. As far as like people who are working for the facility, they're like intertwined. They could easily be catching it. How one of the guards caught it. My life is in danger.
These human beings aren't valued enough for us to apply the same kinds of safety measures there that we are in other sectors of society. If it wasn't already bad enough that you are booked into jail because you didn't have the money to pay the ticket and your license is suspended, that is now life-threatening to you.
Sheriff's Office is now releasing non-violent inmates as a next step in mitigating the spread of COVID-19.
Hundreds of inmates have been released from Shelby County's jail in an effort to put fewer people at risk for coronavirus.
600 inmates.
A total of 38 inmates are ordered to go.
They were inmates. Now they're freed people.
Because of COVID-19, thousands of misdemeanor defendants are rightly being released. It's clear that these individuals should have never been incarcerated in the first place. We can tell by the fact that after these releases, we haven't seen any sort of crime wave. There's a different type of crime wave that should concern us, though, and that's the crime of violence against Black people post-Civil War.
State violence has historically been used to intimidate people of color, especially Black people. We see this all throughout history.
Misdemeanors, they have almost nothing to do with public safety. What misdemeanors do is give police an extraordinary amount of discretion with any minor offense premised on the idea that the Black man is a threat.
Misdemeanors are a very specific mechanism that legalize violence toward Black people and keep them in a very particular place, not just as individuals, but as an entire community of people.
When we look at so many cases in history, often what started as an investigation or a claim of a petty misdemeanor offense led to police officer-supported and sanctioned racial terrorism.
All too often, we see police exercising that terrible authority of violence against people who have only been suspected of the most minor of crime.
The problem isn't bad apple cops. The problem is the system is working the way it's supposed to.
Police shot this boy outside my apartment. They killed him.
Don't move! Don't move! Let's get it, please. Let's get it, please. Hey, bro! You move, I swear to God! Hey, boss! Hey, I just did pretty. It's awful. I'm so sorry. I have no gun.
Gray appeared to be unable to walk and was screaming as he was carried, feet dragging on the ground, to a police van.
I know, you just doing your job.
Mama, they gonna kill me, man. I can't breathe. Please, I can't breathe. Please.
My life could have so easily been taken in that Skyway. George Floyd goes to show further that the most minor of offenses, even no offense at all, could result in death.
The very purpose of racial terrorism is control, is social control.
What we have seen in the killings of those accused was that misdemeanors became the gateway for police violence and murder.
We are seeing decriminalization. We are seeing citations instead of arrests. We are seeing people let out of jail. We are seeing pushback against fines and fees. But at the same time, there is so much more work that needs to be done.
Who defined what a misdemeanor is? The whole thing was built on exploitation, on racial violence, on building up industrial capitalism.
We should not be locking up people who speed, who are too poor to pay a fine or a fee, who loiter or trespass or jaywalk. They're not dangerous, they're not scary.
There's never been a good reason to lock up anybody for petty offenses. Like slavery back in the day, the law itself is doing the work of oppression. The criminal law is providing the authority to arrest Black people, to punish Black people, to kill Black people. And ultimately, the real crime is that we're Black.
When officers use their discretion and still choose to arrest low-level offenders instead of citing and releasing them, they are choosing to lock a human into a cage we wouldn't even put our dogs in.
We got 123 people out of the Hayes County Jail yesterday.
All right, I hope you all were able to watch that.
We did.
All right.
Speaking for myself, thank you for bringing our attention to this.
Hal?
Yeah, there was a book written about this by Alexandria Natapov.
Yeah.
And it's very overlooked in our society about misdemeanors. 75% of white people are more likely to have their charges dismissed or reduced to a lower charge. And the fees cause such crushing debt. The bond schedules poor people can't meet it, so they wait in jail. When they want a public defender, they have to pay a fee. They lose their job. And misdemeanors are money makers for local jurisdictions. I understand there are some things being done to correct this, but I don't think it's happening fast enough. That's it.
I know what the film said.
She's unmute her.
She's unmuted.
All right, well, is it?
Unmute. I think we're all quite thunderstruck right now. I mean, the heaviness of this is heartbreaking. And you just feel what can be done and how can we help?
Yeah. So I can tell you guys a little bit about what we're using the film for, to maybe shed a little bit of light on what our organization does, and then also just what we're using the specific film for. So we're a nonprofit, which is a little interesting because most nonprofits don't make films. But basically we're a nonprofit that creates films and then takes those films and offers them for free to groups or organizations, schools that want to host screenings that are educational in nature, so that people can really understand the issue, or I guess you can't really understand the issues from watching one film, I guess, but spark interest in issues and get people to have a dialogue about things like this. We've been around since 2004. We've made, I think now we've made 13 full-length documentaries, and we have 2 longer shorts. This is one of our longer shorts, so it's a 38 5-minute film, which actually has proved as we've evolved that people actually like the shorter films, because it actually is almost easier for people to come together and maybe watch an hour film rather than an hour-and-a-half film. But we still do create some full-length films. Hal, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. In her book, she says that things are being done to correct this. Have things been done to correct this?
Yeah, so actually Los Angeles is a great example of, so I'm gonna go on a little more and then I'll kind of explain what we're working on with some other people. But just to get back to it, yeah, so we're using this film to basically, so far we've had over 400 screenings of it. Again, with COVID, a lot of these screenings have been kind of like this screening has been in a virtual environment. But one of the great things we're doing is we're actually working with a lot of, I guess we're working with we have worked with about 15 district attorneys across the United States. And I guess you would characterize most of these district attorneys, I suppose, as progressive district attorneys. And they actually have a lot of discretion in the laws that they prosecute. Los Angeles is an example of a district attorney who has actually decided to not prosecute certain misdemeanor offenses. And that has actually had a lot of impact in terms of, if they don't prosecute people for loitering, it isn't as advantageous for police to go out and give people tickets for loitering. That's kind of like across the country what has been kind of catching wind, and a lot of people have been doing that. Again, I don't know if that is the ultimate solution to this, to like the problem of misdemeanors, because it is a very, one of the issues too is that it's all localized. So different cities, states have different misdemeanor jurisdictions and different misdemeanor crimes that are prosecuted at different types of things. So it is kind of a local problem to some extent. But like I said, one of the things that we've been working on is working with progressive district attorneys in their areas and then also showing other people what can be done in terms of the policies of not necessarily giving people lengthy jail sentences for crimes that are arguably not really crimes, and that some people also don't get accused of, or some people don't get caught doing. But yeah, that's basically what we're doing on that front. We're also just using it to show other people what is possible and what kind of just amplifying awareness to the issue of this is happening. Because some people don't actually even understand, because they don't like I think what Hal said earlier is like a lot of people don't realize that you can go to jail for jaywalking because they do it all the time and they've never been caught jaywalking. So that's also one of the things that the film's good for as of late. And we also, so we've done a lot of online screenings, and then hopefully in the fall we'll be doing a lot of in the classroom screenings. So we have a lot of educators that use our films, so we'll be working with them to have screenings of the film in their classrooms. And we also offer a library of our other films. So we have about 20 film packages that, like I said, we offer to any sort of community groups, people, or even individuals that have house parties, and educators and faith groups to use these resources to have a screening, have a discussion with the people there, and maybe do some of the action steps or just talk about these issues and get other people involved. All of the resources are free, they're on our website. And that's what we're doing now, and we're working on some more projects in the future.
Kimber, you might also share the other types of films that you do, also the other topics.
Yeah, so thanks, Mary Grace. One of the other films that we'll probably update it for 2022, is we have a film about voter suppression. So we actually made a film about what happened in Georgia in 2018, and we worked with Stacey Abrams. It's a short film too. It's 38 minutes long, and we actually were able to update that film we were able to update that film for 2020 to include some information about how COVID impacted voting rights, which was really cool. And we'll probably do another update to that film for 2020, and then we're constantly having screenings of that, but I'm sure it'll ramp up more in the weeks to come, or in the months to come. We also have, we have a ton of films that cover a range of issues. I'll share the URL with you guys, but our website is www.bravenewfilms.org. And I can also send that information in the chat when we're done. But you can see on the website, you can see the catalog of films we screen. We also have, some of our classics are our Walmart films. So we did Walmart, The High Cost of Low Price. That was like one of our original films. Most people have seen it. I actually saw it when I was in high school. But that's another good one, just about how Walmart impacted everything. And it's very relevant today in terms of like things like Amazon and that kind of stuff. Some other films we did, we also have a film about gun safety. And then we also have, when there was the war in Iraq, Robert was really big on that. So he has some films about that. And then we also did a film about drones, and also did a film about the Koch brothers. But so if you go on our website, you can see all of the films. And like I said, I'll share that information with you guys all. And also, if you follow us on social media, we do a lot of short films. So like 2-minute films that we use for social media. If anyone has questions, I'd love to answer them. Bill?
Yes, thank you so much, Kimber. I was just wondering, you're talking about showing the films to, I guess, local municipalities or whatever around the country. It's kind of a patchwork sort of. Have you had any of the films shown at, say, congressional hearings, like on a national level, that sort of thing?
Yeah, they have.
Yeah, we have done that. We're planning to do one of those with racially charged. We haven't been able to do it because of the COVID thing. Because we've usually done them in, they have a congressional screening room, which we've used before in the past. We did a suppressed screening with Congress. That is one of the goals with this film. We just haven't locked down a date for that yet. But yeah, that's a great idea. And we do try to use that avenue to get the films out there. But one of the cool things too with this film, so Rachel Rollins, who is a DA in Maryland, in Boston, she actually screened the film with all of her district attorney employees, which was really cool. They did like Zoom, they were at like a staff meeting, and they did a Zoom where not everyone was there, obviously, but they did a staff meeting with the film to a bunch of prosecutors, which we thought was pretty cool.